If you're new to options trading, one of the confusing things can be all of the dozens or even hundreds of option strategies out there to choose from, and they all have different risk profiles. Some of them have unlimited risk to the upside, some unlimited risk to the downside, some have unlimited risk to both sides, some have defined risk to both sides. Some of them have very strange risk profile profit curves, because if they're calendarized, for example, meaning you have some option positions in one month and some in a different month, it can be very confusing to figure out, are you making money on the trade? Are you losing money on the trade? Especially if you're coming from the stock trading world where everything was so simple, right? Because with trading stocks, if I'm long 100 shares of stock and the stock goes up $1, I make $100, right? If the stock goes down $1, I lose $100. For every dollar it goes up and for every dollar it goes down, I know exactly what I'm making. It's very simple. It's the same thing with being short shares of stock. If I'm short 100 shares of stock and the stock goes up $1, I know I'm down $100. And if it goes down $1, I know I just made $100, right? It's very easy. Now, there are some option strategies that actually do quite faithfully mimic being long shares of stock or short shares of stock, as far as they're exactly the same as far as that dollar to dollar movement. We call these strategies synthetic long and synthetic short, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So let me switch over to my trading platform. Of course, I'm using TASTYTRADE as my trading platform, and I pulled up the options chain for AMD. I don't currently have an AMD position, and I'm going to go out to the 60 DTE options chain. Actually, before we talk about options, let's actually buy 100 shares of long AMD. So if I do this, and let's go to the curve and analysis tool here. A one lot of AMD, a one lot is 100 shares, you can see is 100 deltas. That's 100 long deltas, meaning for every dollar AMD goes up, I make $100. And for every dollar AMD goes down, I lose $100. And our max loss is unlimited to 0, and our max reward is unlimited to infinity. Unlike options, this risk profile is very easy to understand because we're not dealing with things like delta and gamma and vega, where a dollar change in price, affects options differently depending on which dollar we're talking about. Are we talking about this first dollar from essentially 147 to 148 going up, or are we talking about 148 going to 149? Because that's going to be a different effect on the options price. Or 149 to 150 will be an even different effect on the options price because the delta will change. Delta affects pricing. The gamma will change, especially as we get closer to expiration. Vega affects pricing because volatility changes things. But with shares of stock, we don't have to worry about any of that, right? For one thing, our deltas with shares of stock are static. They never change. If I buy 100 shares of stock, I have 100 deltas. Those 100 deltas will always be 100 deltas, no matter what. No matter how much the price rises, no matter how much the price falls, I will always have 100 shares of stock. So I will always have 100 deltas. Now, the downside to buying or selling 100 shares of stock is the cost, the buying power reduction. So if you're in a cash account, AMD right now is trading for $147 per share. You would have to spend $14,700 to purchase 100 shares of that stock. Now, in a margin account, which most people are probably going to be trading on margin, I have a margin account, so I only have to put up half that amount. So I only have to put up around $7,300 for 100 shares of AMD. But that's still a lot of money, compared to, your typical buying power reduction on option strategies. And honestly, you can actually recreate this exact same risk profile using options, and you can cut that buying power reduction almost in half. So let me clear that out, and let's go back to the options chain. I'm going to go to the 60 DTE options chain, and to recreate being synthetically long 100 shares of AMD, what you would do is you go to the at the money strike. I'm going to go to the 145 strike, and I'm going to buy a call at the 145 strike, and at the same time I'm also going to sell a put at the 145 strike. Now that's kind of interesting because buying a call, that's a bullish strategy. Selling a put, that's also a bullish strategy, right? Buying the call, I'm going to get 57 long deltas. Selling the put, I'm going to get 43 long deltas, positional deltas. 57 plus 43, what does that equal as far as our positional deltas? Well, look down here. Our positional deltas are 100.17. It's essentially 100 deltas. If I go to the curve and analysis, look at this. The risk profile exactly the same as had I just purchased 100 shares of AMD. The difference is, look at the buying power reduction. Before it was $7,300, now it's only $4,100. So this is called a synthetic long. Now there is also a synthetic short. First, let's show the profile of shorting AMD, 100 shares of AMD. So this is 100 short shares. Again, the buying power reduction, $7,300 to short the shares, but you can recreate this same short 100 delta position using options. And all you do is, instead of buying a call and selling a put, do the exact opposite. Buy the put to get the short deltas and sell the call to get additional short deltas. Those additional short deltas total 100 short deltas, so minus 100 deltas on the position. If I go to the curve and analysis tab here, you can see now we are synthetically short 100 deltas, and our buying power reduction now is only right at $4,000. So we reduced our buying power reduction from $7,300 down to $4,000. So let's talk about max reward versus max loss. So on the synthetic short that we're looking at, our max loss is infinite to the upside. We can lose to infinity, but we also, our max reward is infinite to zero if the price falls all the way to zero. But it's essentially, our max reward is unlimited, our max loss is unlimited. Same thing with the synthetic long. Our max reward is unlimited to the upside, our max loss is unlimited if the stock falls all the way to zero. Now, what is your break even on these trades? Well, the break even point on these trades, it'll depend a little bit on whether you're synthetic long or synthetic short. Let's start with the synthetic long. So if I go back and buy a call and sell a put, right? This is the synthetic long. I am paying a debit for this trade. I'm paying a debit of $335. If I go back to the curve tool here, our break-even point is going to be the 145 strike, but I have to make up the difference in the debit that I had to pay to put on the trade. So our break-even point is really 145 plus the debit I paid. So if I paid $337, the price is changing because the market is open, but essentially my break-even point is going to be 145 plus 337. So my break-even point is going to be 148.37. So, you know, I need the price to actually rise 337 before I can break even, because I've got to make up the difference for the debit paid for the synthetic long. Now, the synthetic short, on the other hand, is going to be a credit trade. So I buy the put, sell the call, and now I receive a credit of 347, essentially the opposite, you know, of the synthetic long, you know, so now I'm receiving essentially that same amount of credit. And just like with the synthetic long, the synthetic short, what's my break even? Well, it's the strike price of the two options, 145, plus the credit I received. So again, that break even point is going to be the same. It's going to be right at 148.47 is what it's going to be right now, because again, the price is fluctuating, but it's going to be, you add either the debit you paid for the synthetic long, or you add the credit you received for the synthetic short, and that gives you your break-even point. So that's how you construct synthetic long and synthetic short options trades. Now, what's the advantages and disadvantages of these trades? Well, I think the main advantage, obviously, is the buying power reduction. If you do this with options, it's just a lot cheaper. Now, what's the disadvantage? Well, I would say the disadvantage is you have to remember options trades are on a timer, right? When you buy an option, there is an expiration date. So these things don't last forever, where when you're long 100 shares of stock or short 100 shares of stock, you have those long or short shares forever until you finally close the position, or in the case of, you know, the bankruptcy of the company. But let's assume the company doesn't go bankrupt during the life of a trade. You will always have those shares. You can hold those shares for the next year, 10 years, 40 years, right? Where options trades, again, if I put on this 60 DTE trade in AMD, in 60 days, that trade will be over. So I'm going to have to do something. I'm either going to have to manage the position at some point, you know, take it off for a winner or a loser, or roll the trade. Or, you know, I've got to do something with those options, where I don't necessarily have to do anything if I'm just buying and holding shares of stock. So, in my opinion, the synthetic long and synthetic short option strategies are not a replacement for a long-term, buy and hold kind of stock strategy. That's not what these are for. These are really meant to be played for short-term strategies. So, for example, let's imagine that a company is having earnings tomorrow and you want to play the earnings, and you're coming from the stock trading world, and you typically do these things by either getting long or short 100 shares of stock, depending on which directional bias you have, which directional assumption you have on this company and its earnings that it's reporting. Well, instead of, paying all that money for those long or short shares of stock, you could do the exact same position with these synthetic option strategies and still get the same 100 long deltas or 100 short deltas, but at a fraction of the cost. And if it was going to be a short-term trade where you were going to buy the 100 shares and the company reports earnings tomorrow, and then whatever happens, then you're immediately going to sell the shares for a winner or a loser anyway, it just makes sense to do that with options rather than those really expensive shares. Now, if you want to employ these strategies, I do want to warn you about a little bit of the risk, because if you've never traded these strategies before, they are going to really move around, right? The P&L swings on these trades are going to be a lot different than any other option strategy you're typically using, because, for example, buying a call, selling a call, buying a put, selling a put, you're never doing those things at 100 deltas, right? You're never buying or selling 100 delta option. That just doesn't happen, right? For example, if I'm putting on a bullish trade and I want to sell a put on a stock, typically let's imagine I sell a 20 delta put. Well, now I am essentially long 20 shares, right? Because I have 20 long deltas. So equivalency, I have 20 shares of stock is how that works. Well, if I'm doing one of these synthetic longs, well, I have 100 long deltas. That's the same as being long 100 shares of stock. So that's 5 times the share equivalency, right? So my P&L swings are going to be massive compared to the typical short put that I would do. So just be prepared for that if you employ the synthetic long or the synthetic short. If the underlying stock makes a big move up or down, especially the move against you, that's the one you should worry about. If it makes a big move against you, that options trade is going to hurt much worse than most other option strategies. Now, if you want to learn more about the basics of options trading, and especially about my favorite option strategy, the wheel strategy, check out my book, The Super Wheel Option Strategy, available over on Amazon. You'll find a link to my book in the description below. Peace, guys.